The wind howled across the Wyoming plains, dragging with it the dust of a dying winter and the scent of despair. On a lonely ridge stood a woman in torn calico, her face pale, her eyes hollow but burning with the fire of survival. Beside her clung 2 children, thin as fence posts, their cheeks raw from the cold. Her name was Clara Mae Hollister, a widow for 3 months, a mother for 8 years, and a soul who had forgotten what mercy looked like. She hadn't meant to end up at Ryder ranch. She had meant to die quietly in the woods, where her children wouldn't see her break. But fate, stubborn and cruel, led her to the rancher's door with nothing left but pride and a whispered prayer. When Ryder opened that door, he didn't see a stranger, he saw himself from 10 years ago. A man who had lost everything to the war, to drought, to loneliness. His rough hands, stained by soil and sweat, trembled as he looked at her. "We haven't eaten in 5 days," the widow whispered, her voice barely more than the wind's sigh. Her son's lips were cracked, her daughter leaned against her skirt like a fading flower. For a moment, Ryder didn't move. Then, without a word, he turned, tore a loaf of bread in half, and placed it in her trembling hands. "Eat," he said simply, his voice low and gravelly. The woman hesitated, her pride fighting her hunger. But when her children's tiny fingers reached for the bread, pride lost. They devoured it in silence while Ryder stood there, watching, something heavy shifting behind his calm eyes. When the children were done, Clara looked up, shame flooding her expression. "We'll be gone by morning." "I'll work off what we took," she said, clutching her shawl. Ryder shook his head. "You'll stay," he said firmly. "There's room in the bunkhouse." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. "We don't take charity." He met her gaze, unwavering. "I don't offer it. I offer work. Food for help. Shelter for safety." There was something in his tone that allowed no argument. So she nodded, silent tears tracing the dirt on her face. That night, as the children slept near the warmth of the ranch hearth, Clara stood by the window, staring out at the vast emptiness. She had once been the wife of a man who dreamed big but died small, a farmer who couldn't win against the land. Now, here she was again, surrounded by fences, men's tools, and a quiet she didn't understand. But something about Ryder's ranch felt safe. The next morning, she rose before dawn, scrubbed the kitchen floor, milked the cows, and even mended a fence by noon. Ryder watched her from a distance, his hat low over his eyes. She worked like she was trying to bury her grief beneath every movement. Days turned into weeks. The widow who once trembled at his doorstep began to fill the house with a faint sense of life, children's laughter, the smell of stew, the sound of her soft singing while she hung laundry. The ranch began to breathe again, as if the land itself remembered what warmth felt like. Ryder, a man known for silence, found himself lingering near her without reason, helping her carry wood, fixing the door latch she could have done herself, listening when she spoke of the past she couldn't forget. One evening, when the sun dipped behind the hills and the air smelled of rain, Clara found him mending a saddle. "You've been good to us," she said softly. "We'll be leaving soon. You've done more than enough." Ryder looked up, his eyes tired but kind. "And go where?" he asked quietly. "The world don't have a place for a woman alone, or her young ones." She looked away, unable to answer. The truth was, she didn't know. "I can't ask for more," she whispered. "You didn't," he said, setting down the leather strap. "But I'm offering it anyway." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He took a slow breath, stood, and faced her. "A home. A name. Safety. My last name." The words hit her like thunder. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. The storm outside cracked open the sky, lightning flashing across the plains. "You don't even know me," she managed. Ryder's eyes softened. "I know you're strong. I know you love your children. I know this land's been cruel to you, but you didn't quit. That's all I need to know." Tears welled up, and she shook her head. "I buried one husband. I can't bury another." He stepped closer, voice steady as a promise. "Then don't bury me. Just, let me walk beside you." The fire flickered between them, the warmth of it spilling over the room like hope. For the first time in months, Clara didn't feel like she was surviving, she felt like she was living. The children, half asleep on the rug, stirred, unaware of the storm breaking not outside, but within their mother's heart. She looked at Ryder, the rancher who had given her bread without question, work without pity, and now something she hadn't dared to dream of, belonging. Slowly, she nodded. "All right," she whispered. "But not for me. For them." Ryder smiled, small but real, the kind of smile that promised shelter through any storm. "For them," he agreed. Outside, the thunder rolled away into the distance, leaving only the steady sound of rain on the ranch roof, a song of endings, and perhaps, beginnings. And as the firelight danced across their faces, the narrator's voice could almost be heard saying, "Sometimes, the hungriest souls aren't fed with bread, but with kindness." Weeks passed since the storm that sealed their quiet understanding. Clara Mae Hollister, now Clara Mae Callan, walked the ranch like she'd been born to it. Her children laughed again, their bellies full, their cheeks pink with the color of life. The neighbors whispered, as they always did, some with envy, some with disbelief. A widow taking a rancher's name so soon. But Ryder didn't care, and neither did she. Together, they worked the land, built fences, fixed roofs, and in silence, built something greater, trust. Yet even as spring painted the plains in color again, a shadow lingered in Clara's heart. Some nights, she'd stand by the barn window, clutching her shawl, staring out toward the east, as if expecting someone, or something, to come riding out of the dust. Ryder saw it. He saw it every time she froze at the sound of hoofbeats or when her laughter stopped too quickly. One night, he asked softly, "Who are you waiting for, Clara?" She didn't answer. She only whispered, "The past has a way of finding you, Ryder. Especially when you think you've escaped it." He didn't press her. He just nodded, his quiet way of saying he'd stand between her and whatever ghosts came calling. But fate doesn't always give you time to prepare. It was near dusk when the rider came, dust rising behind him, a dark figure moving fast through the dying light. The air turned still, the animals restless. Ryder stepped onto the porch, hand resting near the rifle by the door. The rider slowed as he neared, and when he removed his hat, the world seemed to tilt. It was Luke Hollister, Clara's dead husband. Or what was left of him. His face was leaner, his eyes sharper, haunted by the kind of pain only men who've survived too long can carry. "You're supposed to be dead," Clara whispered, stepping onto the porch, her voice trembling. The children froze behind her, eyes wide. "I was," Luke said quietly. "Until they let me out of that Confederate camp. Took me 2 years to walk back here." Ryder's jaw tightened. He looked at Clara, then back at Luke. "You've got a home somewhere else, Hollister?" he asked evenly. Luke's lips twisted. "I had one. Until she took it." His voice was a whip, and the children flinched. "You married her," he barked at Ryder. "My wife. My name's still hers, my blood's still mine." Ryder's voice stayed calm, but every word was steel. "She buried you, Luke. She starved, she begged, she prayed for you to come back. And when you didn't, she learned to live again. You want to blame someone, blame the war. Not her." Clara stood between them now, shaking, tears cutting through her dirt-streaked face. "I thought you were gone, Luke," she cried. "I waited until the world stopped waiting. The children needed food. I needed to survive." Luke stared at her for a long, unbearable silence. "And did you survive, Clara?" he asked bitterly. "Or did you forget?" The wind screamed between the ranch posts, a wild sound that made the horses rear. Then, before anyone could speak, lightning split the sky and thunder rolled. Luke turned his horse sharply. "You'll regret this," he spat, and rode into the storm. The children began to cry. Ryder didn't chase him. He just wrapped his arms around Clara as the rain poured down, his voice a low murmur in her hair. "He's gone, Clara. Let him be gone." But she knew better. Men like Luke Hollister didn't leave quietly. The next nights were long and sleepless. The dogs barked at nothing. Shadows moved by the barn. And then one night, the fire came. The barn roared with flames, the horses screaming, the sky lit up orange like hell had come to Wyoming. Ryder ran into the fire without hesitation, his coat catching sparks, his voice shouting Clara's name. She tried to stop him, but he disappeared into the smoke. She fell to her knees, praying, crying, begging God not to take another man from her. When he emerged, coughing, blackened but alive, leading the last horse out, Clara ran to him. The fire took half the barn but not the men who had saved her twice now, once from hunger, and now from despair. Later that night, after the embers died and the children slept, she found Ryder sitting on the porch, burned hands bandaged, eyes staring out into the ashes. "He did this," she said quietly. "Luke." Ryder didn't answer. He just nodded once, slow. "I know." Then, after a pause, he turned to her. "You still love him?" Her voice broke as she whispered, "No. But a part of me remembers him, before the war turned him to stone." Ryder nodded again. "Then let that part go, Clara. He's a ghost. And ghosts can't build the future." She took his hand gently, her tears falling on his bandages. "You gave me bread when I had nothing," she said softly. "You gave my children a home. You gave us your name, but you never asked for anything in return." He smiled faintly, pain and warmth in his eyes. "You gave it, Clara. Every time you looked at me like I wasn't broken anymore." As dawn crept over the blackened land, painting it gold again, they stood together, the widow and the rancher, two souls who had lost everything but found enough in each other to start again. The fire had taken much, but not their hope. Not their courage. Not their bond. Weeks later, the neighbors came to help rebuild the barn, saying the land looked alive again, as if it had chosen them both to heal it. And one evening, as the sun dipped low, Clara's little boy looked up at Ryder and asked, "Pa, can we say grace before supper?" Ryder froze, his eyes glistening. Then he nodded slowly. "We surely can, son." Clara smiled quietly, the ache in her chest finally easing. And as the last light of day touched the ranch, it was as if the land itself whispered, "Sometimes, hunger brings you to your knees, but love teaches you how to stand again."